On November 29th in the year 1996, a 14-year-old boy named Shin Dong-hyuk stood in a crowd of prisoners at Camp 14 in North Korea. It was nearly 3 in the afternoon, and Shin was physically small for his age, suffering from malnutrition and dressed in rags that could barely be classified as clothing. Before him stood wooden posts where his mother and brother were tied, while guards nearby checked their rifles and loaded bullets. The entire population of the camp, consisting of thousands of prisoners arranged in rows with children at the front and adults in the rear, had been forced to watch the impending execution. Despite the horror unfolding in front of him, Shin was not crying, nor was he trembling or looking away. He watched his mother's final moments with a complete absence of emotion, feeling no sadness, guilt, or love, because the prison camp system had never taught him what love was. He had been born within the confines of the prison and knew nothing else, raised by a system that instilled a single, brutal lesson that family would eventually betray you and one must survive alone. To understand how a child could witness the death of his own mother and feel nothing, one must look back to the events that began 3 months prior to the execution. Shin had done something that would haunt him for the rest of his life, an act he would not understand was morally wrong until years later, when he escaped to the outside world. He had informed on his own mother to the camp authorities. Shin was born in 1982 in Camp 14, a political prison camp so secretive that the North Korean government denies its existence, despite satellite imagery clearly showing guard towers, coal mines, and 155 kilometers of barbed wire. His parents had not married for love, but were paired together by guards as a reward for good behavior, allowed to sleep together only 5 nights per year to produce children who would inherit their prisoner status. This system operated on a doctrine where guilt extended for 3 generations, meaning Shin was born guilty of crimes committed by his grandfather. Shin's life was defined by perpetual hunger, as the camp provided only 600 calories per day, leading children to eat rats, insects, and anything else they could catch. He once found corn kernels in cow dung, washed them, and ate them, considering it the best meal he had eaten in weeks. Violence was also a constant reality, with teachers punishing students fatally for mistakes and guards executing prisoners for breaking rules, such as a woman Shin watched hang when he was 4 years old for stealing 5 kernels of corn. His education consisted solely of memorizing 10 rules, the first of which stated that any witness to an attempted escape who failed to report it would face immediate execution. He learned to read not from books, but from warning signs on the high-voltage electric fence that surrounded the camp. When Shin was 11 years old, he noticed his mother was hiding food, such as small amounts of corn or potato, which was a capital offense in Camp 14. Under the camp regulations, any prisoner witnessing theft was required to report it immediately or face death themselves. Shin did not view this situation through the lens of family loyalty, but through the lens of survival, fearing he would be punished for her crime. One night, he feigned sleep and listened as his mother and brother whispered about a plan to escape. Faced with the choice of protecting his family and risking the ultimate penalty, or reporting them to ensure his own survival, Shin did not hesitate. The next morning, he provided a guard with all the details of the conversation and the hidden food, receiving praise from the guard, who told him he had done the right thing. In Shin's world, betraying family was the correct action because it adhered to the rules of survival. However, the system was cruel beyond Shin's understanding, and when guards arrested his mother and brother, they also arrested Shin. Despite following the rules, he was thrown into an underground punishment cell, a concrete room with no windows. For 7 months, he endured severe torture, including being held over intense heat sources that burned his back and stomach, leaving permanent scars. The guards punished him not because they believed he was complicit, but because the system demanded harsh punishment for anyone connected to rule breakers, even children who acted as informants. After 7 months of suffering for doing what he was told was right, Shin was brought to the execution ground, barely able to walk due to his infected injuries and malnutrition. Standing 15 feet away from his mother and brother, Shin felt no regret or horror as the guard announced their crime of attempted escape. Instead, he felt intense anger toward his mother for planning an escape that had led to his own torture. He was angry that she had not considered the consequences for him, viewing her as a threat whose actions had nearly cost him his life. As the shots rang out and his mother and brother collapsed, Shin watched with a blank face, and that night he slept better than he had in months because the source of his danger was gone. He returned to his life of labor in the mines and factories, his capacity for empathy destroyed by the camp. 7 years later, when Shin was 21, his routine of waking at 5 in the morning to work 12-hour shifts in the coal mines was interrupted by the arrival of a new prisoner named Park Yong-chol. Unlike Shin, Park had not been born in the camp. He had lived in Pyongyang and traveled to China, possessing knowledge of the outside world. Working beside Shin, Park whispered stories about life outside, describing grilled chicken with crispy skin, pork, beef, and bowls of white rice. The idea that people could eat as much as they wanted without anyone taking it away sounded like a fairy tale to Shin, who had never known a moment without hunger in 21 years. Park explained that even poor people ate this way, and eventually revealed a plan to escape by crossing the electric fence and traveling north to China. For the first time, Shin felt a desire that superseded his fear, driven entirely by the promise of food. Park possessed knowledge of weak spots in the fence and guard patterns, and they planned their escape for January 2, 2005, during the New Year holidays when guards would be less attentive. Shin prepared by stealing clothes and shoes from other prisoners and waiting for the designated night. On the night of the escape, heavy snow was falling as they met near the coal storage building and moved through the shadows toward the fence. The electric fence hummed with lethal voltage, and Park volunteered to go first. Park touched the fence tentatively without reaction, but as he climbed, the high voltage activated, killing him instantly and leaving his body seized against the wire. Shin was faced with a critical choice: try to pull Park off and risk capture, or use Park's body as a shield to cross. Demonstrating the survival instinct bred into him by Camp 14, Shin used Park's body as leverage to climb over the fence, allowing the electricity to flow through Park while Shin sustained survivable burns to his legs. He dropped to the snow on the other side and ran without looking back or mourning the man who had given him the dream of freedom. Shin ran for hours through the forest on injured legs, driven by the knowledge that stopping meant death. By dawn, Shin collapsed near a farming village, facing the reality that he was outside the fence but still in North Korea, a country controlled by soldiers and checkpoints. He looked like an escaped prisoner, emaciated and bleeding, so he hid in a barn where he discovered an old military uniform hanging on a wall. He discarded his prison rags and put on the uniform, tying the oversized pants with rope. The uniform transformed him. When he walked out the next morning, a farmer bowed to him, assuming he was a soldier. The disguise made him invisible, allowing him to travel north while stealing food and cigarettes from farms and storage sheds. People offered him food out of respect for the uniform, unaware that he was a fugitive. Shin collected cigarettes and food not just for himself, but as currency, knowing that border guards were often hungry and corrupt. When he finally reached the frozen Tumen River, marking the border with China, he did not try to sneak past the guards but walked directly toward them. When a guard demanded identification, Shin silently offered his bag of stolen food and cigarettes. The starving guard, ignoring the fact that Shin's uniform was ill-fitting and his behavior suspicious, accepted the bribe to feed himself and his family. The guard pointed toward the river, and Shin walked slowly across the ice, smoking a cigarette to appear calm. He reached the Chinese side and looked back to see the guard turn away, pretending he had seen nothing. Shin had successfully escaped Camp 14 and North Korea, the first person born in the camp to ever do so.